Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to our virtual showcase. Thank you so much for taking the time to join myself and indeed our sponsors, Makersite, for today's discussion, which is focused on addressing scalability and granularity challenges for manufacturing with complex supply chains, a roadmap for eco-design. My name is Nick Pryke. I will be your host for the next 90 minutes and very much looking forward to filling that purpose. My role here is very much to get us going, keep that conversation balanced, and give you all the open space to explore challenges, share insights, and connect those all-important experiences. To that extent, a couple of quick bits of housekeeping before we get started. This is a closed-door session. Nothing we discuss here will be released into the public domain, so please do feel comfortable and share those all-important perspectives. Today's showcase will contain a keynote and indeed a panel discussion, both of which will have an open audience Q&A session at the end of them. So please do get involved. We actively encourage it. To do so, we have Adam, our technical operator, who is in studio with me on hand to field questions and get you ready to ask away. Simply drop your question in the chat or indeed DM Adam himself, and we'll bring you up on screen and stage when the time is right. In the same vein, please do feel free to use the chat to engage with one another. This showcase is all about getting the most out of those 90 minutes for you and driving the most value into that conversation. And to make sure that continues past today, our team at Synergy will be following up with you after the showcase to get feedback on your experience and any connections you would like to make alongside the recording and any information from today's discussion that you would need to continue on those conversations. But enough from me and more about what we are here to talk about today. Quite of a bit of a scene setter for us. So the days of superficial sustainability signaling are rapidly dwindling, and with good riddance. Today, consumers are more eco-conscious and sustainability savvy than ever before. They're not only aware of the importance of environmentally and sustainably friendly supply chains, they are more than capable of uncovering which products and companies champion them and choosing to vote with their wallets accordingly. With it, today's manufacturers are also aware of the needs to both prove and elevate sustainability in their own supply chains to compete for tomorrow's business. Get it right, pass go, and make your way to the proverbial top of the preferred supplier list. And while that may sound simple enough, as I'm sure a lot of you in this audience will already know, that reality can often be anything but. From fostering more effective teamwork to elevate sustainability strategies, to harnessing data both internally and externally in better ways to secure faster and stronger decision making, manufacturers need access to real-time insights across their operations to drive better decision making for improved efficiency, transparency, and accountability when it comes to their all-important sustainability efforts. Of course, all of that needs to have compliance baked in, not iced on. So to do so, an emerging wave of AI technologies could very well be the answer in both zooming out for scalability and in for granularity for manufacturers that are working in and contending with, let alone leading, those complex supply chains. The question is, what should your eco-design look like, and how do you make your sustainability strategies work? To kick things off on that journey, I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker for today. A virtual round of applause for Sophie Keiselbach, team lead expert over at Makersite. Sophie, hello. Can you hear me loud and clear, first of all? Give you a few seconds to join us there. Hello, Sophie. How are you? Let's just unmute you.
Now I'm back.
Fantastic.
Thank you. I'm fine. Thank you.
A pleasure to have you. Lovely stuff, Sophie. Well, I will stop talking, hand the mic over to yourself for a fantastic keynote ahead and some really good scenarios that I know you're going to be going through. A quick note to our audience, I'll be back in around 15, 20 minutes or so, and we'll be going into our first live audience Q&A with Sophie. So please do get your questions out the ready, send them over in DMs, feel free to chat away. And Sophie, we'll speak with you in 15 minutes. Over to yourself.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction. So today I'll have the pleasure to give a short keynote on how to address scalability and granularity challenges for manufacturing with complex supply chains. Very welcome to that. So first, I want all of us to align on a definition for eco-design, because there, as you all might know, many definitions out there, and to say eco-design, that's something very easy, but actually it's a complex construct. And for that session, eco-design is an integration of environmental aspects into the product development process. You consider environmental aspects in all stages of the product development process. You strive for products which have the lowest possible environmental impact throughout the product life cycle. Environmental impact, though, that could be everything and not everything, as you all also might know. Eco-design is the design of usage context in product design, and it is the design of action and life process in communication design. So the designer more or less becomes, or the design itself becomes, a mediator between consumer, environment, and economy. And it's actually the one thing where you can change the most. You all might be aware that there is the ESPR. There is already an ESPR existing. That's the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, and there has been published a new proposal, which is really very interesting because it actually extends the scope of what eco-design is in a regulatory regulatory space. It adds things as product durability, reusability, presence of substances, recycled content, remanufacturing, recycling, the carbon and environmental footprint, and also other information requirements. So suddenly, not just from not just from how you actually, define eco-design, suddenly also from a regulatory space, eco-design is getting blown up. So what we see is that we have identified 4 challenges to actually meet all the requirements which are in the proposal for the new eco-design regulation. The first challenge is there are so many stakeholders you have to please. Basically, there is the regulatory piece and the NGO piece, which I put in one basket. So you have to report on some stuff. NGOs want to see some certain reports on certain pieces of regarding your product. You have the customers and the suppliers who actually also want to have certain aspects seen in the product they buy from you. You have the market who has its own rules, and you also have internal stakeholders. They also have a perception on what they see as an eco-design product, right? So that is the first big challenge, to actually please all the different stakeholders you will have, which are meeting your product. The next challenge out there is actually that there are so many different subjects you have to, answer to. Everyone will have heard of CSRD, which is a very complex reporting system, which will be which you will be in charge if you're a bigger company from next year on. There are several aspects in the supply chain, also regulatory aspects which are coming up in that regards. Some customers of you want to have an LCA. You have product carbon footprints you have to deliver in each and every corner of the company and also outside. There is the aspect of material compliance, which has to be done and checked. If you have sites outside of Europe, you also will have to answer to CBAM. There is still the cost aspect, which is driving products the most, right? Some will want to have an EPD. You have to answer to CSDDD. So there are so many regulatory and other aspects out there. And one of the most stressing thing is you have to somehow be able to answer them all. And if you have many products and very complex supply chains, that is actually a struggle. So there is the question how to somehow automate that, right? So that is more or less the second bigger basket of challenges. Then we have the third challenge for answering all the all the different demands, and that is for sure the internal structure. I mean, every company out there is set up in a different way, and you have a different way on how they communicate and how they work together. Certainly the product is somehow in the middle, but how every how every department is answering to the product and working with that product is different from company to company. And depending on the setup you have in the company right now, it makes it harder or easier to answer all the aspects. And it also makes it harder or easier to answer, to actually cooperate within the company, right? With all the aspects you have to answer, but which we had in the first two buckets, it's actually not so easy. You have to start, some departments have to start to work together which haven't worked together before, and they have to agree on aspects which they haven't had to agree before on that, which makes some sort of transformation. There's some need for transformation and the need for communication in new communication lines, right? And of course, you also will have experts and consultancies that can be internal and external, but they are always an important part to somehow answer the external demand on eco-design. The last and fourth bucket, which is a challenge, or can be a challenge, and of course these are all intertwined, right? But nevertheless, it's a challenge for itself, is the data landscape. So the question is, how can you put all the data together in an AAA manner, like automated, auditable, and accelerated? How do you get a valid output? You need different data sources. The data are usually in various systems. So I am working in sustainability consulting and in general in that area since more than 50 years, and I haven't yet seen one company who had all necessary data in one system. So that is for sure one of the challenges. Where are all the data hidden? The data are usually owned by different business lines and people. Not everyone has access to the necessary data, meaning that you also have to somehow gather that aspect. And usually there is also a wide range of different software tools for the same data type in different sites. So it can happen that, for example, you collect energy data and waste data for your production sites on a various different software tools, just because it happened naturally over the history of the company. And the last thing, which also is one of the challenges I see, or we see companies facing, is that the data are not available in electronic form. So there are various challenges to actually enable the company to answer to the outside expectations and enable eco-design in an automated manner. Yeah, I guess you have found yourself in at least 1, 2, 3 of the points I have mentioned in the presentation so far. So we at Makersite have actually seen all these challenges, right? And we have found a way how we solve it, and that's something I want to, show to you. So our approach is that we said, okay, we have to find a way to bring together all the data of a company and map these to all the needed other databases, life cycle databases, chemical databases, compliance databases, you name it, right? And they have to somehow be mixed and matched up in a way that matters, and so that still the company recognizes their own data, right? We have done that, and that is something where AI comes in, machine learning and certain algorithms, in a way so that you have it put together in a way that you can put out all the different insights, reports, analysis you need to actually drive eco-design, to understand your supply chain, to answer all the requests you might get with one model. So no need to have thousands of different Excel files, thousands of different tools, and a lot of different people to put together the data, which is always something which is not so easy to manage. There are many mistakes which can happen. And if the tools cannot communicate to each other, there's also a loss of information in between. So our solution to that problem was, if you have one model that serves them all, right, you don't lose any information, and it's also easy to get into the gaps. So with that approach, what we have found is that you actually can solve a lot of the challenges I have mentioned before. For the data landscape, you actually build up a digital twin for the data you have in your company that provides you with a clear overview of where your strengths are data-wise, where your weak spots are, and where your actual gaps are, right? For the internal structure, it provides you with one platform where you can identify your internal stakeholders. You can invite them to work on the same platform. That makes communication much faster and much smarter. You don't have to have new communication lines and new rules set up so that everyone can use that tool and the other tool. Actually, it's all summarized in one tool, and you work together in that one by using the actual data, right? You can, stakeholder-wise, you can satisfy the needs of internal and external stakeholders in real time, and you can even include the supplier information. So you are building up your own supply chain information. And topic-wise, it's easy because you have used one model, so that one model can serve all the different purposes. It's real time. You can be upfront new developments because everything is already calculated. It's auditable, and it's easy to maintain because it's using your actual real data. So that was our approach on how to solve the challenges for eco-design. And I think that AI in general, so that is of course our approach on how to solve the problem. There are others out in the market, but just to say, I think for very complex products with a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of very complex supply chain, I think the only way is something similar to that, where you have where you have the help of, as I said, AI and machine learning to help you to put it together in one model, right? That has to be the future. Otherwise, I don't see how to solve all the problems in a way that actually doesn't bring you in a lot of trouble if I see all the upcoming regulations. So that was my keynote to the discussion, and I'm looking forward to the panel. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff. Sophie, thank you very much indeed. I've been scribbling down frantically as you've been going through those slides, yeah. And I've certainly got a few questions. And just again, out to our audience, as you've got questions, if you've got questions specifically for Sophie, you want to expand on anything from those slides there, of course, we will be sharing today's slides after the showcase as well. But please do give a virtual raise of the hand, drop a DM. You can also drop into the Q&A navigation in the bottom nav there as well to ask questions. Myself and Adam, my technical operator here, will bring you up on screen to ask your question to Sophie, and indeed a bit further later down the line, our panel as well. Sophie, while we're lining up some audience questions, a few from my side. I mean, first of all, you know, great scenario, and I'm sure, you know, what was that, six, 7 slides that seemed so simple and succinct, probably had quite a few hours of head scratching and working out the best way to get that information down and right. Talk us through what you were considering when you were building out those different scenarios and thinking about how, you know, what are the common challenges there and how to actually present that in a simple yet strength defining way around those challenges for those different companies, certainly those dealing with such complex supply chains.
Yeah, I mean, it's all experience, right? We see that in the daily manner on what the main challenges are. I have been working in that sector like for many years now. So basically, if you do that for many years, it's not that much of a head scratching anymore. It's more of a how can we solve the problems, because the problems are the same. I mean, it's the same problem, but if they're different in a different color, maybe, right? As I said, every company has a different setup, but the problem in itself is the same. So the actual question was more at a certain point of time, like how can that be solved, right? How can you somehow make out of all these challenges a solution which you know kills them all and makes it better. And I have presented you our approach of how you do that, right? But I guess there's a lot of discussion potential on that approach as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, let alone the multiple variables. I mean, what was it? Challenge 3, the internal structure. Let's take that as one example. You know, million different internal structures for a million different businesses. Yeah, let alone the external dynamics and relationships they hold with the suppliers, and yeah, not even getting into their more complex supply chains outside of that. So that being said, when, you know, in your experience, how difficult is it for manufacturers and companies to truly understand their current data when they're getting started? You know, you've got to be able to see your unknown unknowns, I suppose, is quite a difficult thing to do. So, you know, how difficult is that? And is there any advice that you can offer companies that are going and taking those first steps on their journey?
So if there are 2 aspects to it. So from an historic point of my view, I would say it was quite different to get a hand on the data and put them together in a meaningful way. Just to produce an LCA, it's already a trouble because you have the data which are internally, but you have to merge them and somehow change them to actually make something out of it so that you can use it for should costing or for the life cycle assessment or for compliance. You know, you have different requirements for that all. So, and to make that in an accelerated, like, you know, big scope, that's hard. That means a lot of man hours. Okay, so a lot of and that's the exciting thing of what we have done by somehow merging that automatically, right? You get such a pretty nice overview of what you have and where your gaps are, that is actually no problem anymore. That's the exciting thing on what we have done so far, right? I would say with the approach we have chosen, what we have seen with the companies we're working with, is that they are excited, to understand that they actually probably have more data than they expected to have, right? Because we are using every bit and piece you might find, which you might not yet have thought of that it might be relevant, right? So we are using everything and make the best out of it. And from there, it's then easy to understand where the gaps are, right? Because if you are aware of what your actual data, let's put it mass, can actually do, right? From there, it's easy to build up a strategy on that and say, okay, that's where we are. That's our status quo. And now let's go forward further, right? Mm-hmm. As I said, it's a massive amount of data you're working with, right? And I don't think that there is a way to do that without some sort of machine learning or AI, because of that massive, you know, massive amount of data, right? We're talking for complex manufacturers. If you're working with bill of materials, it's a 2,000 line bill of material is nothing. And now multiply that with 20,000 products, and then you know what massive amount of data. And then you just have to go back, right? There is a lot of other data behind this stuff with energy, waste, and so on and so forth, compliance data. So we're talking about a lot of different data points at that point. Yeah,
absolutely. Don't ask me to do the maths on that because I couldn't give you an answer. But certainly, and actually, you know, I'm what I'm not going to do is get us down a rabbit hole of AI specifics here. But certainly, when you look at the sheer magnitude and volume of data there, structured data, unstructured data, ever changing, you know, you start moving into things like neural network patterns that you can work with unstructured data, and how that translates back into the life, you know, or the modeling of digital twin, and seeing how those have interplay there. I suppose once a company has gone down and as you said, is I'm oversimplifying here, but got to that point very quickly, which we know it wouldn't be, to understand their current data and the potential of that current data. And also, again, as you say, to have probably grasped data that they didn't know they had or didn't know they had access to, and how that starts to play into their modeling. Once that data is understood in sustainability terms, how can companies, manufacturers look to optimize their data sources, whether that's internally or externally, to start to unlock faster, stronger decision making?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk now about the definition of environmental sustainability a lot here, right? But if we're talking about what is actually the stuff companies need at the moment, that's aspects like broader carbon footprint, life cycle assessment results, circular economy aspects, stuff like that. Okay. So when usually the data which you have are usually enough to produce a valid life cycle assessment result or product carbon footprint result. The good thing is if you're actually using every bit and piece of data you have available and not cut it off because you have to fit in some system, but you have your digital twin, and that's why you're not cutting off any data flow, right? The only you will recognize very quickly that it's actually at the suppliers where you have to fill in data. So basically from tier 1 upstream and then downstream after your product is in the market. That's where you actually have the gaps most of the time. And that is where you have to start to communicate with suppliers. Also, again, something which you should drive with some sort of system, right? Some sort of IT system. We incorporate that automatically, because that's where you get more specific, and that's where you understand, okay, where actually are my, not the low-hanging fruits, because the low-hanging fruits, that's something a lot of companies already have identified, but where are the next fruits I can reach without spending millions of dollars, right? And where in my supply chain do I have to reach out first to actually, get to that place?
Yeah. And those mid-hanging fruits are going to be different for every company. But are there any? Do you tend, in your experience and from your perspective, are there any more common mid-hanging fruits that companies tend to go after, or that you perhaps would recommend as opportunities?
I think that is very much depending on what company we're talking about, right? It's a big difference between someone with agricultural pre-products or someone with the steel and aluminum and stuff like that in the product. So I would say the good thing is if you have an overview over your data, you can actually find the suppliers which matter the most, and you don't have to interact blindly. I have seen that with a lot of companies, that they are very market driven. So they have suppliers, they have customers or a certain niche which demands something urgently. So everything is concentrating on that part of the portfolio, and the view is like limited to that view. And if you start to limit yourself, right, it's hard to actually do a strategy on your whole portfolio or something which is long-term and valid for long-term on a long-term perspective. So that's why I say, if you want to be ahead of the game and not just driven by the external things which are out there, right? It's good if you have an overview. And coming back to that, so I think one of the biggest things you will see very soon and immediate is what suppliers you have to go first, and you can start to actually build up a range of where you start, what's the next block and what's the last block, right? Who matters the most, where you have to interact the first to actually do it on a strategic level, and not on that market driven thing. I mean, you always will have that, but somehow with all that stuff coming, you have to be ahead of the game, right? The worst thing which can happen to you is that you're always one step back of the game. Yeah. That is killing every business, because you're guiding the money in directions where you don't want them to be, because it will not help your business to sustain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I suppose to that point with the suppliers as well, and creating that priority list of who, when, and why. I mean, even within there, there's countless variables. Do you start with those mid-value suppliers that are high complexity and important relationships, high value suppliers that are simple to get through and bring on board, and there's so many variables within that, which actually brings us on nicely to another question that I had. But before I do, just another quick one out to our audience as well. I know Adam is in our chat at the moment, getting you all up to speed and how to ask questions. Please do feel free to ask Sophie, our keynote, any questions over the next kind of 10 minutes or so. And also we have another audience Q&A coming up after our panel. But Sophie, back to our point around, and I'm going to move us away somewhat.
sorry, I just had something in mind. Coming
Yeah.
back to eco design, you also don't want to eco design just for the purpose of eco designing so that your customer is happy. I mean, of course, you want that your customer is happy, right? But on the other hand, you also want to eco design to reach your goals. If you have a strategy, you usually everything, all the directives out there, they demand to have goals. There are SBTIs, and I didn't name them all on my slide, obviously, because they're just a lot. So you want to reach goals. If you don't have an overview, you can't concentrate on the bits and pieces which are actually valuable. So if you see that this part of your portfolio is actually the one which is the most important from your from the company perspective, you want to concentrate on that piece and bit and piece, and guide your money into that and do the eco design on these product, right? And not just the ones where sales is screaming the loudest and saying, hey, we need that one because our customer needs that. You have to serve that as well, obviously, but nevertheless you have to work on the other thing as well. And if you think of how much time it costs right now, I mean, there are already half automated tools for some of the aspects out there, right? But nevertheless, if you think of, if you are doing eco design at the moment and you want to do it properly, right, not just on one aspect, then you have to have an expert internally. You have to understand your costs. You have to understand the procurement. You have to talk to the designers. The designers have to find other alternatives that has to be fed back because they also have to do their calculations. And that's a process which takes months for one product, right? Just imagine if you could do that in just one day, right? That is time and money savings.
Yeah, let alone then multiplied by the number of products you have, and then the magnified efficiencies from there. As well. And actually, well, before we do move on, I really like that AAA, automated, auditable, accelerated as well. Definitely stealing that with your credit, of course, there, Sophie. But again, it actually seems we're talking around like, the sheer volume of compliance, regulatory bodies, regulations, cost was in there as well on that slide. Clearly needing to automate to be able to handle all of those within that complexity as well. My question around that is how does that AAA manner manifest itself in reality? Does it start with automation? Are they truly balanced in that kind of blend of what a company needs, and it needs automation, but it needs to be accelerated and it needs to be fully auditable? I was going to try and be clever and add accountability into that, but I think that's probably under the umbrella of auditable. With that automation piece, how important is that above and beyond what we already know? But perhaps more importantly, what have you seen to be some of the really big success stories or efficiencies for companies that have really grasped that ability to automate at scale within such complex environments? Yeah,
it takes away a lot of pressure. It takes away a lot of pressure if you can actually automate, accelerate, and audit the data and the whole model and get different outputs. Actually, that makes your life so much easier. And just from all your experts, all your people are actually free to do their actual work, right? You don't spend time on figuring out how to model that, how to do an LCA for that product, how to, the whole project management which is behind. Suddenly it just is like, duck. It's there. You don't have to worry for that anymore. And that alone, that thing that brings you a lot of freedom in actually, taking next steps which are valuable and accountable and where you can stand behind, right? Because the worst thing which can happen, and that might not fit to anyone in the audience, but I have seen it already, is that you have to do something for a customer, obviously customer driven, right? But then another customer asks for a strategy, and suddenly because that was the only thing you concentrated on because you didn't have more time, more people, right? Or you just missed it, could be as well. And suddenly you have to merge that piece into some sort of strategy and say, that's what you have done, that is your strategy, right? And in the light of that new greenwashing directive, which is also out there, that is the worst thing. You want to avoid that, right?
Yeah, at all costs. So actually, let's move away from the the AAA and data for a second, and actually to those things behind the data, us people. When it comes to fostering better teamwork, to engaging workforce, employees, collaboration behind those strategies, what are some of the key ingredients to help fostering better teamwork there, Sophie? What have you seen work well to help elevate sustainability strategies from the human and people perspective?
I mean, that almost gets philosophical, but on a very clear base. I think there was a saying I have once read that somewhere, that sustainability manager or head of sustainability actually not just has to be good in the field of the, like, has to have expertise, but actually he also has to be a good, people's manager, and has to be able to, make people want to do something, bring them on the same path, educate them, which is an own thing where you have to be good at. So it's hard to be both at the same time. But actually, I think it all comes down, I mean, there are many different things and you can read them all up, but how to motivate people and how to engage people and how to bring them on the journey to eco-design, right? But I would actually say in the end, it's all about educating all the stakeholders you have, meaning internally, externally, and also, of course, also in regards of regulatory bodies, because somehow your market or your product has to be understood also from everyone you're talking to. So I guess that is a bit then it's a bit of me answering to a very complex question with a very obvious answer, but in the end it comes down to that.
Stuff. And hold my hands up, Sophie, I appreciate that was a very deep and philosophical question, and we could do an entire showcase just probably on that one question. But I suppose my point in asking it was, there are people behind our screens and data and AI that are still at the crux, and important that we can enable their decision making.
Yes.
In part as well. Incredibly.
And that's why that's what I meant before, right? If you enable people to work with all the data which are available, and you don't hinder them by structures or by you can't access that data, or you need 5 people to get to the data, and if you just take that away, you already free up people to actually do their job. That makes it much easier for them. That's what I meant by, if you have one data model, everyone is working with that. These barriers are gone, right? So from that perspective, I think that's one of the aspects which really help in working together.
Lovely stuff. Well, on that note, we have an audience question. So we're going to bring up, if you give us a couple of seconds, Edin, or Edin, if I'm saying that name correctly, we're just going to bring you up on stage now, Edin, to ask your question to Sophie. So we should be having you up just in a couple of seconds, if you bear with us. Can you hear us yet, Edin?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can indeed. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic, very good, thanks, Ian. Well, I will hand over to you to ask your question to Sophie, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very interested in the topics you are discussing, and I work as a product owner, and for me, it's interesting to see those market insights on the sustainability, especially. I'm more interested in the all the organizations are market driven, so listening to the customer needs and expectations from the market. But on the other side, we also have regulatory aspects of this sustainable development, which your product that you're presenting here is pretty much, I would say, considering. But when it comes to the overall market, as I see you have a lot of experience there, what is, in your opinion, to which extent is sustainable development driven from the market and from the customers itself, and to which extent is it pushed from the regulatory bodies that are pretty much different across the globes. As we know, in some countries they have less strict regulatories.
Definitely, yeah. So I would actually, first we have to differentiate the markets. We have the European market, which is a thing on its own and the most complex from a regulatory perspective, and also from a bit from the market perspective, depending on the market sector again and the industry you're in. Then we have the US market, and then we have the Asian market, then the African and South American market, right? I would say for the in regards of environmental aspects and regulatory affairs, the European is actually, you know, on the forefront. And if I look at it from like the past 15 years, it was an interesting mix of market driven and then regulatory. It was like an up and down. So first, I don't know if it was first, but the mechanics I have seen in the past 15 plus years was that one market somehow had to do something about the topic. That could have been because some of the customers wanted that, or it could have been because an NGO pushed it, right? That market actually, or that industry discovered the topic for themselves and have seen that there is actually also an advantage if they do it, right? There have been these 4 front runners, I would say. So it's not the big mass, but there have been some in the market who have driven that, right? And these companies also, of course, because it was a market, it was an advantage, they pushed it to a point that also the regulatory like pulled in. And they didn't just pull in that industry, but probably more of the industry. So another industry started with the same process. And so I would say it's like an up and down between market and regulatory and market and regulatory. And that process actually speeded up quite a lot the last years. So now I can't see that mechanics anymore that well, because right now the market is just exploding, and it's a mixture of both regulatory, like really huge regulatory affairs, and also the industries who are trying to solve the problems for themselves, because they see not just from the regulatory perspective, but also from a risk perspective, actually, that they have to care for some of the specific markets. So I would say both. Long story short. Sorry for the long story.
It's fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Eden?
Yes, perfectly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us on screen. And indeed, to the rest of our audience, we will be coming back with part 2 of our audience Q&A after our panel, which we're just about to come on to. So Eden, thank you very much, sir. Sophie, thank you very much for your keynote as well. We're going to be staying with you and you with us as you join us on our panel as well. Yep. So without further ado, on to our panel. I'd like to introduce today's panel and today's discussion for that panel, which is all around shaping supply chain, supporting scalable success. Do love a bit of alliteration here at Synergy. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll take a deeper dive into the perspectives of 3 of our sustainability experts leading the charge, unlocking their insights and getting real on the challenges and opportunities facing the industry and industries today. We have joining us on our panel, David Tannehill, Sustainability Enablement Director over at Heineken. We also have Øyvind Fredriksson, Global Sustainability Director at Hexagon Purus. And we also have Angie Brugelman, Sustainability Manager at Volvo. And of course, rejoining us, you already know her as Sophie Keiselbach, because that's who she is, making up our panel today. Øyvind, David, Angie, good afternoon. Can you hear me all first, loud and clear?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for taking time out to join us on our panel. I'm going to get us stuck in. It really is a deeper dive into that hive mind of experience and insights from all of you and your differing perspectives on how to create that more effective roadmap. So, I mean, as we move through, do feel free to anything in opening that you want to expand on from what you've already heard from Sophie's keynote, or indeed from Eden's question. Feel free to do so. David, I'm going to come down to you first, sir. Not picking on you, purely at the bottom right of my screen, to say hello. Thank you for joining us. as well. And to ask really, you know, from your perspective, from a Heineken perspective, whichever you prefer, or a bit of both in between, what are the biggest challenges you're facing today when it comes to addressing sustainability in your supply chain, either at a macro or a micro level?
Yes, and thank you, and good afternoon to everyone, assuming you're in Western Europe, but you might not be, so good morning or good evening to you. Yeah, there's many different things when I was thinking about that question, and I'll come back to the most important, or the one that's most in the forefront of our mind, but considering kind of that balancing of the short-term operational efficiency versus those long-term environmental and social and responsible for us ambitions that we have. And then you've got this dilemma, and I think Sophie was talking about that with that last question, just around this compliance and report to drive this need right now to invest quite heavily in your operational structures, your resources to comply, versus the real want and need to invest in delivering your ambitions. And it's to make sure that you don't you get that balance right, and that you don't get too swayed by trying to just comply, just report. We need to actually start making a difference, and we need to start meeting some of our ambitions. And then taking with your supply chain, taking the people in your value chain, motivating suppliers and customers to come on that journey with you and to do what you need them to do to help you meet your ambitions. But I think the biggest thing that's in the forefront of our mind is just that diversity and that scale and complexity in our supply chain. I mean, we're in over 100 countries. We've worked with multiple partners. Some are other multinationals who might have the same level of maturity as us in terms of their sustainability journey. But then we work with tens of thousands of smallholder farmers across Africa. You know, and what can your expectations be of them? And what do you need to do to educate them, have conversations with them, get data from them, capture data from them? What can your aspirations be in that area? And that achieving sustainability across that vast network is probably one of our biggest challenges.
A lot of nodding heads there, David. And I really like that piece around investing in your resources and supplies versus investing in your ambitions, which I think is a really important one that I want to come back to as well. Or even I'm going to come down to yourself, sir, for nodding heads, and also to ask you the same question. So, you know, feel free to open up on anything you've already heard from David, and where does that challenge sit for you today? What is already, you know, off the horizon and being worked towards?
So for our supply chain is not as complex as Heineken's, right? We provide zero emission mobility solutions. So for instance, trucks like Volvo would be our intended customers. But working with that proprietary technology, that is also, then we need to address conflict minerals, for instance. We need to address technology from our suppliers, which is also very secretive and in the research and development phase. So for us, it's more about collaborating with our key suppliers in order to get the data that we need. So whenever we're initiating LCAs, the first thing we do is to set up this project organization with key suppliers, just giving us the information we need, and also, I mean, collaborating with them, helping them to understand it as well. And one of the key aspects, I think, is also to use that the LCA dimension or the supply chain dimension to bring the knowledge out to the organization you're working in as well. I think most companies still struggle to communicate sustainability in a very coherent and communicative way that involves everyone. And I think working with products, which everyone knows, right? Everyone has an insight in what the Heineken does and what it produces, right? You can see the can. I think if you can involve the sustainability discussion around any of these products, I think it's easier to integrate it into the organization as well. And that goes back to Sophie's circular diagram, right? How to work with the organization to understand it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that, yeah, that piece around the collaborating with key suppliers, I mean, to to open up on that, how do you feel from your perspective? Do you think when you're engaging with new suppliers moving forward that, I mean, surely the requirements and expectations from your side of what you would want as a checklist for those suppliers is going to continuously evolve? Maybe expand on that slightly. How do you see that changing? How do you see being in better control of that, perhaps when you're making decisions around new suppliers?
First of all, we need to understand what kind of impact categories we want to look at, right? I mean, for some suppliers, social risks might be the key decision maker, right? Whereas others, it might be water usage or carbon footprint. So whenever we're engaging with new suppliers, we just need to look at what kind of products we're after and what the alternatives are. But we plan to optimize using, of course, cost, but then also looking at what the environmental footprint is and how that aligns with our overall company strategy. So it's a part of the procurement process to look at the sustainability dimension and at least include it in any decision making. The current issue is that most of the time the discussion revolves around cost, right? But that's also about keeping the organization up to speed on how sustainability can be a profit driver as well as a cost cutter, right?
Mm-hmm. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much, Øyvind. Angie, I'm going to come up to you. Same question. I can't help but feeling it'd be risky me to not ask. Feels like there's a Jean-Claude Van Damme should be doing the splits behind the truck there, and I know he wasn't, but I had to ask.
Not in this shot, not in this particular shot, but that's an image that a lot of people do know when they see our trucks, definitely.
So yeah, from the Volvo perspective, and again, open up on anything you've heard from Øyvind, from David. Same question over to you. What is front of mind? What is one of the perhaps more priority challenges and or opportunities? Let's open up to that as well.
Yeah, well, I think for us in the heavy duty transport market, we are definitely more compliance driven at the moment, more regulatory driven at the moment, just because it is new in the sustainability game. The clients are not quite there yet. I mean, I think David can probably attest to this. There's a lot that needs to happen on the back end for sustainable transport to actually become a reality and to become scalable. So we're just internally, we're just kind of looking to see where we can get some efficiencies, where we can form good partnerships. The CEO of Volvo Group has said on numerous occasions, partnership is the new leadership. So we've gone into joint ventures with our biggest competitors, for example, Traton and Dalmar for fuel cell. With Traton for fuel cell factory, looking forward towards fuel cell hydrogen in the future. We have a partnership with those same companies for a charging network in Europe, a public charging network. So, if you look at everything that's required for us to actually be successful in our product offerings, it's not just about, of course, all the things that we're doing aside from that with focusing on right now our battery electric, and we have a new battery plant in Ghent. And of course, we're always looking at our supply chain and how we can resource, especially when we're looking at finite resources. We have a lot of, with the battery electric, we're looking at with the lithium, of course. So those things are all happening, but moving forward to trying to see, how can we reinvest? Because at this stage of the game, it's not profitable what we're doing. It's not, the scalability is years away for us. So we're just looking at how we can kind of reinvest and use what we're learning within the industry in a broader sense to just kind of bring in everybody and open the dialogue and where we can share information. We're, of course, a production company, and we're not allowed to share a lot of information. We got in trouble a few years ago. You guys all know about that. So we are limited to a certain extent to how much we can share with each other, but just trying to open up the dialogue and see where there are economies of scale and efficiencies and what we can learn from each other in the market. But with our customers, Heineken is a customer of ours here, or the transport companies that are our customers are customers of Heineken. You can see that there's so many more things that have to happen in the long term in order for them to kind of get on board and say, okay, let's move past the 1 or 2 trucks we've bought and let's actually get some real numbers in there and see if we can make a big difference to move forward. Yeah.
Super interesting. So not just on that really nice soundbite, partnerships and new leadership, love that.
Yeah.
But also on the, you know, the idea of partnership in an evolving space. When you look at partnerships, coalitions, pre-competitive collaboration, how all of that plays into unlocking knowledge sharing and unlocking and accelerating towards new possibilities, which is equal parts exciting as it also is from a commercial standpoint. Risk inducing, for want of a better phrase. You know, as you said, you're not making profits on these things, and that's absolutely not the intention. But at some point that has to, that balance is going to shift. And what does that mean? And so I think that there's a lot of space there that still needs accommodating when it comes to things like those partnerships and building out certain coalitions, Angie, which is actually a piece I'd like to come back to further down the line, if I may. But Sophie, I'm going to come across to you just to wrap us up on that opening question there. And again, to anything you've heard from Oivind, David, or Angie, and your take on a similar question. You know, where do you see some of those more common challenges, you know, over 2023 and as we move in towards 24? Can't believe it's November tomorrow already. But yeah, where does that sit with you from that perspective?
So I definitely want to pick up on collaboration within this, within the whole product life cycle, right? That, and also across, because that is for sure key to enable some things we have to enable to make it work, right? So, and yeah, that will lead to maybe also a new way to do business, I think. Right? So that's for sure one of the key things which have to happen. And then in the end, I also see, yeah, the transformation needs on very many, so on many ends. I mean, that you have heard that bits of pieces by of David and Angie and Oivind. They all said that basically there, yeah, in the end it has to be some transformation in the whole network and how we work together, right? So if I would have to summarize everything what we heard, it's like, you know, collaboration and transformation basically. Yeah,
collaboration, transformation, yeah, big topics and big subjects that we will continue to cover through the next few questions. Oivind, I'm going to come back down to yourself and then David across to you for and bear with me here, I'm kind of listing off quite a lot. But there is a question at the end of it. So just a bit of an abstract here. So, you know, with complex supply chain of your own, delivering sustainable products with this idea of compliance baked in, not iced on, is certainly about more than checking in on your carbon initiatives. Today, it's about deeper tier insights, harnessing real-time data from multiple sources, as we've heard from Sophie, as we've heard from the first round of questions. It's also about delivering reporting and analytics at scale and across operations, and doing so with intelligence at speed, better, faster, more impactful decision making. I'll send you that list through afterwards. But my question here is, you know, what do you focus on when it comes to the strategic thinking to help build the foundations of improving efficiency, transparency, and accountability across your operations and inside your operations? What do you focus on first? What are you focusing on first?
So we have to acknowledge that, I mean, there are differences in sizes of companies. I'm quite sure that we're the smallest one of the lots here. We're still focusing on operational excellence and of course, data related to operational excellence. I think we just have to acknowledge that we are not ready for the future reporting requirements, but also the requirements coming from the CSDDD, for instance, looking at supply chains. So we are heavily investing in operational capabilities and operational systems that can capture data that can be used and will be used for future reporting. But reporting is easy if you have good data and if you have good a good foundation, and it's about finding the nuances in the big data lakes. This is where I think it was interesting to hear from Makersite that you can take every bit and piece and try to seam it together. But for the moment, we're more investing in operational performance and operational data efficiency and performance management. That's where our focus are at the moment. Our products can be assessed as sustainable in many ways. but the reporting will eventually be solved in case we have good foundational data.
Absolutely. And interesting to say around those data lakes now, I mean, as much as you feel comfortable expanding on this, Oyvind, how is that journey going with those disconnected data lakes and reducing / removing some of those silos there?
We can only be better, I think. I think the potential is really there because we capture a lot of data every day, right? And even data does not necessarily need to be anything stored on the computer, right? It can be manual. So it's about extracting that information you have on site or you have on the cloud, and making that into relevant decision-making data. We're not there yet, but we're building a digital strategy, and I think that is foundational as well in order to be able to comply with the market and comply with the regulations, but then also enable collaboration with your customers and suppliers.
Yeah, again, that collaboration piece. Oyvind, thank you very much. David, same question to yourself. So operational excellence over at Hexagon and Oyvind's side. What about yourself at Heineken? What do you focus on? What are you focused on today when it comes to looking at that across your operations?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When I look right across the whole spectrum of the business, you know, we'll probably have the ability to focus on quite a lot at the one time. So I think what we have done recently and continue to do is more how we put a framework and a governance around that constantly evolving question about what do you focus on, because that changes and needs to, as I say, have a huge breadth of vision within the business. So what we have done is we've got a ground up governance process. From every operating company we have globally has a sustainability and responsibility steerco. That then tiers up to, and that happens once a quarter. Then regionally, there is a regional steerco happens every quarter as well. And then when we get up to a global level, we split off into management, kind of focused on each individual topic. So there's a climate, there's water, there's circularity, there's social and responsibility committees that happen 6 times a year. And then we have our exec team chaired by our CEO, 6 times a year, 3 hours, and S&R steerco, and that is topics that have surfaced in all of those underlying steercos. This is about dilemmas, really trying to get that balance across the competing aspects of the agenda within the business: profit, growth, capital, use, and sustainability and responsibility. So we have all those discussions, and then we top that off with 3 times a year we have a session with our supervisory board, and that is getting that outside in perspective, really shaping and guiding us and what we want to do from an executive point of view. So we've spent a lot of time getting that governance process right, and that allows us to adapt and evolve over time to the many different aspects of the sustainability journey that you need to try and focus on at any one point in time.
I love that, and that kind of proverbial, not to paraphrase here, but that proverbial kind of freedom in a framework. If you've got that governance process there, as you say, which is, you know, certainly is continuing to mature in its evolution, I would have thought of every quarter, let alone every year, in your understanding and what you're discovering there. Extremely important. I suppose if you cast your mind back to how that framework started, David, what advice could you offer to any of the audience out there that might be considering something similar, albeit on a far smaller scale?
Yeah, and we started putting this in place before we were doing our TCFD disclosures, which require you to be very open and transparent about what governance you have in place. So we fortunate enough that we had the foresight to do that, but I think it was toned from the top. So our CEO and our wider exec team really had sustainability as one of the 4 key pillars within our global strategy. And that just elevated it automatically throughout the business and allows you to get that airtime to really talk about your operating model, what your roles and responsibilities are across all your different functions, right down to opco level. And that allowed us to put this governance in place. If we didn't have that advocacy from the CEO and the exec team, then we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting, that tone from the top. Thank you very much, David. Angie, up to yourself. From the Volvo perspective, again, where does that focus? We've heard from Oyvind on the OpEx side of things, David more on that governance process and framework. What is the Volvo perspective, and where is that focus currently?
Yeah, I think that's very similar to the Heineken perspective. The Volvo Group, because we fall in Volvo Trucks under the Volvo Group, has had sustainability as one of the pillars since the 70s. And actually, it wasn't called sustainability then, it was just environmental care. So it's been one of the underlying motivations for our company for a very long time, what we call the Volvo DNA. So it's just part of that. And then I think because it is a massive corporate structure with the group and the business areas underneath it, so we have a lot of guidance from that side. There's a lot of target sets. Our purpose is very clear, but at the same time, they use a best practice model. So the market companies, every country is kind of left a bit to their own devices to say, okay, we have this target. How should we approach this? What should we do? Because they do recognize that the regulatory environments in different markets are different in different regions. So they want to kind of say, hey, how are you guys going to approach this? And they keep their ear to the ground and they listen for good projects and ideas, and then give those projects a platform within the entire group. And then suddenly you have a really large stage to be able to duplicate those good projects. So, and I think with best practices, you have that kind of built-in accountability with it, because it's been thought of by your people. They are invested in what's happening then. And I think for other employees, they say, hey, that's really cool, they're doing that, and so we can give that a try. Hey, if they did it, we can do it, kind of thing. It makes it also a lot more accessible, I think, within the company. It's not just coming from the top down, but that it seems more of a level playing ground between the market companies to be able to duplicate those activities.
Love that. Yeah, I suppose showcasing that proverbial art of the possible, and then leading with the, well, actually, yeah, if you can do it, then we can do it, and we want to do it, and we're all engaged in there, which again comes back to that piece of collaboration and transparency internally, let alone externally as well. Sophie, across to yourself, and before we do, actually, I'm just going to put another shout out for our audience questions that are going to be coming up in around about 7 minutes or so. So just like he did for our keynote, feel free to get your questions either in our webinar chat, raise a hand down at the bottom, or indeed drop a Q, I should say, into our Q&A in that bottom navigation bar. So feel free to ask any of our panel, all of our panel, one specifically, entirely up to you. Get your questions at the ready. We'll be coming to some audience questions in around 7 minutes or so. Sophie, back up to yourself. Again, we from Oyvind, operational excellence, framework piece from David, talking about accessibility, that level playing ground again from Angie, that Angie's just brought up. Feel free and comments on everything you've heard as always. I'm going to move us on to a bit around AI in just a minute. But what do you see as some of those key or more common focuses? Where do you feel, and specifically on David's piece, with Heineken being larger, or certainly larger, and its governance framework, how does that play out in the Makersite experience? How can you help enable those for other companies, or those ways of working for other companies?
Yeah, I try to not make a 5-minute speech out of that answer, so bear with me. So regarding the aspects which the other panelists were talking about, I definitely have to agree. So the journey is a different one for everyone, right? And everyone is at another step in the journey, so you can't compare. It's never good to compare. You just can find people who are at a similar place and talk to them and learn from them and discuss and have share ideas. I think it's all about sharing ideas. What a bit which I heard, which I think is very true from my experience, is at least is that you have to have the C-level involved and engaged, and they have to be willing to do it, right? Because if you don't have them, if they don't see the value in it, right, or the the long-term or the mid-term perspective also on, you know, having an advantage in the market. And if they don't, you know, buy in, it's getting down to a regulatory piece, and then it's just awful to be honest, because it just makes the whole thing much harder if you don't have the buy-in of the highest level of the company. Yeah, so that, I think that piece is, I think, valid all across the different companies, and I think that is very, very true, that buy-in has to be there, right? To go back to what Makersite can provide, what we have seen is that if there is clarity on your own data, which, as I said, I mean, right now I'm coming from the data space of things, right? And right now, obviously, we have a lot of companies who have to somehow speed up the process, somehow have to accelerate, somehow have to feed the market with, you know, more information that they have been able to do so far. One thing what we have seen regarding the governance piece is, if you have clarity with your data, it's also much easier to shape that governance piece, because you're much more clear on, you know, what you can do when, and what makes the most sense, you know, to actually have a meaningful, you know, governance in place. Actually, that's something we can see, and also that piece of communication. The platform just allows you to communicate through, you know, different levels of the company, different hierarchies, different functionalities, and that makes it also much easier to cooperate in the company, within the company, and that again helps back, because it makes that governance piece, to shape that governance piece, much easier, right, and make it more specific and clear. Yeah.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, Sophie. And indeed, yeah, that C-level buy-in, absolutely critical. Otherwise, you are in a painful world of regulatory fire only, which is not enjoyable for anybody, I can only imagine. But increasingly, as we've already heard here from all three panelists, you know, going on that journey of differing directions and levels and evolution around that, you know, getting that senior level and leadership buy-in is absolutely critical. Thank you. David, I'm going to come back down to you, sir, for our third question, and I'm not going to get us into a conversation about ChatGPT. Don't worry, but certainly on the AI front of things, as a real opportunity, and we could, you know, we're not going to, but we could run an entire 90 minutes just talking about AI and its potential opportunities in complex supply chain, as I'm sure we've got more slides on anyway. But from your perspective, how are you looking to configure AI to automate away from a lot of these manual tasks? If you look at, you know, like manual LCAs and improving data quality, to move away from manual errors, manual tasks, I suppose AI in that context, is there anything specific that you're focused on or looking to leverage in the emerging AI space over at Heineken?
Yeah, in terms of specifically on improving data quality, probably not very much. I mean, we were doing lots with AI, but a lot of it is customer and consumer facing. Mm-hmm. A good example would be in our downstream value chain, looking at route optimization for secondary deliveries. You know, that really has enabled a step change in even kind of reducing time to make those deliveries, reducing carbon and fuel as a result of that. We used, from a data perspective, we use predictive analytics and AI in our TCFD modeling and disclosures. I'm not sure how many people have had the pleasure of going through that process, but we focused on 3 specific risks around water usage, barley yield, and carbon tax. And without the ability to scenario model many different aspects using AI aspects, looking at 2030, 2040, 2050 and various different scenarios, we wouldn't have been able to make the disclosures that we were, and we're on this journey towards being able to put some sort of financial numbers around those. So they're just 2 different ends of the spectrum examples of how we're using AI.
And I'm sure that journey will accelerate as quickly as the AI tech that we're seeing accelerate coming into the consumer side of the market as well. Angie, from again, similar question, but from the Volvo perspective, how are you configuring AI similar to David, completely in another context to David? Where does that sit in the Volvo perspective at the moment? What is it? What tinkering is going on around?
I was muted, sorry.
No worries.
I think the largest area that we're working with AI right now is in our Connect services, and that's the intelligent systems that operate in our trucks. And that can be anything from, Optimize from freight routing to preventing truck breakdowns and really in the operation. So there's a lot of work happening there. But I think even more interesting is the use of AI with the emerging innovation and technologies that we're using. For example, for battery electric, the batteries themselves, there's not a lot of data there. So AI has proven very valuable in intelligent management systems for the batteries. And the group technology is now working on a project, it's called the Decision Engine. And it's basically using the data that's coming now out of the batteries with AI to make better decisions moving forward with the batteries, because we're starting to enter this period where the batteries will be deemed they can't be in the trucks, they have to be replaced. And then there's a whole decision-making process that has to happen after that point in terms of, do they meet the requirements? Can they be remanufactured? Do they not? Can they go into second life for second life battery market? But you have to monitor also the supply and demand of the second life battery market in order to understand, is that really a good option for you? So there's a lot of, I think, new markets in that area around batteries and second life batteries that AI has proven to be very, very effective and useful for in those areas. And I think moving forward with, our technology group is working, of course, on fuel cell electric, biofuels, and I think in any area of technology where you're innovating and you're a forerunner, and there's always limited data, that AI can be very valuable in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there may be I don't know, Nick, and that's a question I can't answer right now. Have you noted, things like the decision engine and all the work you're doing around the intelligent management systems? Is there any inspiration that you found that has come from outside of the sector, outside of Volvo's direct experience, when you're looking at new models and new ways of working with data and AI? Or has it been very much we're going to start collecting and using AI and machine learning to understand the data that we need better within that battery sphere, if you like?
Yeah, I'm not directly involved enough, I think, in that part of the business to be able to accurately answer that question, I'd say. There's a massive department, they're called Group Truck Technology, and they're kind of our little worker bees. They're trying to figure out all the technical problems.
Absolutely fine, Angie. It was a 50-50, but I wanted to ask for input. Lovely stuff. Thank you. Oyvind, down to yourself as well. Again, same question, emerging tech, AI, what are you doing with it? How does that play into a piece of a puzzle over at Hexagon?
So we actually do the same with our battery packs. We use, leverage the Internet of Things, right, to feed back data from all the products and services. So we can also look at second life for any of our products and solutions. For instance, we have tanks with compressed gas that can be used for second life. Just about downsizing, right? But it's also about finding the right time to do it and optimize on safety, which is the utmost priority, of course. But we also use AI or data analytics to look at our supply chain from a human rights risk assessment point of view. Geographical risks is easy because it's just looking at the databases, but combining them with industry-specific risks, that can give you a clear oversight of your, the supply chain, the risks in your supply chain, and that requires a bit more data power than just looking at databases. It's about combining them and finding triggers. And of course, you can also do the supply risk assessment by performing massive media searches, right? And that's something you can also leverage computer power on. So serving the internet basically for information about your suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, multiple uses, some in products, but also some for more reporting purposes.
Anything you can expand on within those reporting purposes, Oyvind? Is there anything that's kind of come to light that's been it's certainly built in additional efficiencies, evolved how you communicate with those reports, and actually maybe even one step further than that, how those reports are starting to shift and change some of the ways of working, if that's not too grand a perspective to offer?
No, but let's take supply chain as an example. I mean, previously we've been working with this retroactively, right? We've been looking at what suppliers we've had, but now we can also use this to model decision about future and potential suppliers going forward. So it's more on the proactive side, really, and having these discussions with suppliers in front instead of doing it the other way around. And that's where I think you can use and leverage the power of data in a more, I mean, strategic way.
Mm-hmm. Lovely stuff. Thank you, Oyvind. Sophie, I'm going to come up to you one last time, to our audience as well. We've got around 5 minutes or so left, so any questions we do have from the audience, now is your time to get them up. Sophie, I'm going to come up to you, and then I'm going to come round for a very hypothetical quick fire round to wrap us up on today. But again, you know, key one for the AI piece, you've already talked about it in your keynote. Absolutely crucial from a Makersite perspective in allowing you to create and deliver that single version of the truth, that one model. How do you see AI shaping and changing that emerging use of data insight and predictive analytics and predictive thinking that, for example, David was talking about? How do you see that continuing to shift when we talk about supply chains, and specifically complex supply chains, over the next, let's say, 24 months?
I actually hope that it will shift everything to more transparency and more clarity, because in the supply chains, I mean, we have seen it the past 3 to 5 years, the supply chains there is a certain risk in there for the business, right? Not just from an environmental perspective, but just for the actual business. I mean, if you have disturbed supply chains, you have a problem, basically, right? And that will continue. That's at least my my expectation. So I actually hope that AI will continue to help to make the whole supply chains more visible, more transparent, and help us in foresee scenarios and do better decisions. So as I said, for me, we all produce data in high amounts, and we are just not equipped to actually dig into these and make them transparent and meaningful anymore. So we definitely need some support there. And that's why I think AI is definitely crucial to, shed some light on the on all our processes, and make meaningful decisions in the end.
Those are all important and essential, meaningful decisions. Look, Angie, I'm going to come over to you for our hypothetical wrap-up question here. Unlimited budget, spend it wherever you like, but where would you spend that unlimited budget if you had absolute decision-making power? What would you like to see change from your perspective?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah, I think, like as I mentioned in the beginning, as much more support we can put into the infrastructure surrounding our the whole transport market, that's necessary to move forward. I think we're facing so many challenges that if I hope that happens more so from out the government in the future. We're hoping to get more support there, but we can kind of see that it's the clients are being kind of pulled in every direction with regulation, with wanting to do the right thing, and I think that we just need to make it easier on the whole for people who want to make the right decisions to move forward and to make their companies more sustainable, from the client, but the small business owners to the large corporations. So I'd say, like we've done the joint ventures, the putting money in really strategic projects that'll make a difference for the future.
Lovely stuff. So supporting infrastructure, lowering the barrier to adoption, and for that sustainability journey, regardless of company size, would be good paraphrasing of that. Lovely, love that. Thank you. David, same question to you, sir. Unlimited budget, opportunity, challenge you'd like to overcome, magic wand, where
Yeah.
we...
And I'll answer this from outside of the Heineken bubble, answer some of the questions, but I do agree with the infrastructure. I mean, having a DRS system in every country to be able to collect bottles and cans and recycles would be great, because there's definitely those countries that have and those countries that don't, and should it be the corporate world or the governments that invest in that infrastructure? There's the question. But I would kind of build on what Angie said, and if I had a magic wand or an endless, I would create a fund where we bought or invested the IP that helped major advancements in either technology or ways of doing things that improved sustainability, and then I would share that IP free to all the companies, because a bit to Angie's point earlier about partnerships and collaborations, and do you work with your competitors, and who has the advancement, and what do you do with that competitive advantage if you have a major breakthrough? We're here to save the planet, we're here to make a difference, and should we lock any of that intelligence inside one company? And how do we unlock that if there is a major advancement? Because in the battery tech, if there is a major step forward, the people who make that step forward will make a huge amount of money. But should they not just share that with the world? Question mark.
Very big question mark, and great answer, David. Thank you very much there, sir. Oyvind, same question to yourself. Magic wand, unlimited budget. Is it going in a similar camp to David and Angie? Where would you put yours, sir?
It's hard to follow up on both Angie's and David's suggestions, I guess, but I certainly agree. And I mean, we shouldn't be afraid of sharing IP either, right? Because I mean, that's the technology that's mature at the moment, and then of course you still have a competitive advantage even though you share your IP, because you might have a product line further down the road where you want the technology to be anyways. So I'm also for collaboration and sharing ideas. I think that's basically how we can solve the problems that we are facing. It's about it's basically about sharing and collaborating with each other. I think we all have the same shared goal, at least people in this panel. And if we can convince the rest of the organization that that can be beneficial for everyone, I think that's the unlimited fund. That's where I would put my money.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, Oyvind. And finally, Sophie, up to yourself. Are we going full house on IP fund and collaboration here? Where is what started as an unlimited fund is now moving to a magic wand, proverbially at the same time? Where would you be putting yours?
So definitely agree on that piece of a collaboration and sharing ideas, and being more, not so much in your own little bubble, but also looking like left and right. That's for sure one thing. But if I might be a bit more like philosophical, because that has nothing to do with money, but with being bold and being, doing the right things. I wish that there would be a little bit more, to make bold moves, to actually not be too much worried if it works out or not. I know that there are so many risks, like you have weird workers and you want them, of course, to keep their working place and everything like that. Still, I think you need to have the urge to make these big moves, to transform your business, to be future proof, right? And I wish that people have enough, what's the word? They are brave enough to do it. Like to be brave enough to make the bold moves. That's what I hope for, and that's nothing you can get with a lot of money or something like that. That's just about the people and having braveness.
Yeah. Can't get it with budget, can get it with a magic wand, allegedly. All jokes aside, that brave, that bold approach, that willing to take the right risks and explore and move that, align with the collaboration and sharing of IP in that fund that David had mentioned and started with certainly Angie's infrastructure support there as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Sophie, Angie, David, and Oyvind as our panel today. Really appreciate the time, let alone the expert insight and experience you've offered to the panel. So thank you very much. For everyone else, we are now at time. So thank you very much for taking time out of what I know are busy days to join us. So there you have it, our panel, and indeed our keynote, and indeed you as our audience. Our team here at Synergy will be in touch with you in the coming days to get feedback, to connect any further conversations, to share recordings and everything that you have seen slide-wise here from Sophie and the team at Makersite today, and to help you with anything else you need. So if you do want us to connect any specific conversations, please do let us know. But from myself and from the team here in the studio, I wish you a great best of the day, and I will speak with you very soon. Take care. Goodbye.